Welcome to Storytales. Please like this video and subscribe to Storytales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. Keaton Bryce pressed his fingertips against his temples as another wave of pain shot through his skull. The code on his monitor blurred, lines of encryption algorithms becoming meaningless symbols. He blinked hard, forcing his eyes to focus. Another headache? Lana's voice carried from the kitchen, sweet concern lacing each word. Just tired. Keaton saved his work and closed the laptop. The software firm's latest security project could wait until morning. Lana appeared in the doorway, wiping paint from her hands with a stained cloth. Green streaks decorated her forearms, matching the color that seemed to dominate all her recent paintings. She studied his face with those dark eyes that had first drawn him to her 8 years ago. "You work too hard." She crossed the room and placed cool hands on his shoulders. "Maybe you should see someone about these headaches." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You barely ate dinner. You've been distant for weeks." Keaton turned in his chair to face her. Lana had paint in her hair too, tiny flecks of green that caught the desk lamp's light. She looked beautiful and concerned, the perfect wife worried about her husband's health. Yet something felt wrong. Something always felt wrong these days. I said I'm fine. Lana's hands slipped away. "I'm trying to help." Then stop asking. Her face shifted, a micro-expression he couldn't quite read. Hurt, maybe, or annoyance, quickly masked. "I'll be in my studio." The converted garage had become Lana's domain 6 months ago when she'd quit teaching. Emotional burnout, she'd called it. Too much stress from dealing with teenagers and their problems. But their savings account was shrinking, and Keaton's salary alone barely covered the mortgage on their Palo Alto house. He listened to her footsteps fade down the hallway. The house felt empty even with both of them in it. Everything was clean and organized, surfaces gleaming under carefully chosen lighting. Lana had excellent taste. The furniture matched, the colors coordinated, each room photographed like something from a design magazine. But it didn't feel like home. Keaton rubbed his eyes and tried to remember when the headaches had started. 3 months ago? 4? The pain came and went without warning, sometimes mild, sometimes brutal enough to make him nauseous. Today had been particularly bad. He also couldn't shake the feeling that he was forgetting things. Simple things. Conversations with Lana that felt fuzzy around the edges. Meetings at work where he'd zone out completely. Days that seemed to slip past without his full attention. The sound of music drifted from the garage. Lana always played classical when she painted, usually something dramatic and sweeping. Tonight, it was Wagner, all thunderous orchestration and building tension. Keaton walked to the kitchen and poured himself a glass of water. Through the window, he could see the garage's converted windows glowing warm yellow. Lana's silhouette moved back and forth behind the glass, energetic and purposeful that she'd been painting a lot lately, almost obsessively. We'd asked to see her work. She deflected, claiming it wasn't ready yet. "You'll understand when it's finished," she'd said. He never understood her art anyway, doctor. Rami Ferris had the bedside manner of a drill sergeant, which Keaton appreciated. No small talk, no false sympathy. Just facts. "How long have you been experiencing these headaches?" Ferris consulted his tablet, stylus moving across the screen. 3 months. Maybe 4. Scale of 1 to 10. 7 on a good day. 9 when they're bad. Any triggers? Stress, certain foods, lack of sleep? Keaton considered this. "Not that I've noticed." "Family history of migraines?" "No." Ferris looked up from his tablet. He was younger than Keaton had expected, maybe early 40s, with sharp features and intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "We'll start with an MRI. Rule out any structural issues." The Oakland Medical Center was a 40-minute drive from Palo Alto, but Ferris had been recommended by Keaton's primary care physician as one of the best radiologists in the Bay Area. Worth the trip. "Any metal in your body? Jewelry, piercings, surgical implants?" "No." "Ever had any surgical procedures involving your head or neck?" "No." The MRI machine looked like something from a science fiction movie, all white curves and technological precision. Keaton lay still as the machine hummed and clicked around him, trying not to think about the enclosed space or the noise point. 20 minutes later, he sat in Ferris's office while the doctor studied images on dual monitors. "Well, there's your problem." Ferris's voice had changed, lost its clinical detachment. What is it? Ferris turned one monitor toward Keaton. The brain scan showed layers of gray tissue, blood vessels, the complex architecture of his mind rendered in black and white. But there, in what looked like the left side of his brain, was something that definitely didn't belong. That's a foreign object lodged in your parietal lobe. Ferris pointed with his stylus. Metallic, approximately 3 millimeters in diameter. Keaton stared at the screen. What kind of foreign object? That's what I'd like to know. It appears to be some sort of electronic device. An implant. That's impossible. Ferris pulled up additional views, different angles of the same object. I've been doing this for 15 years. I know an implant when I see one. I've never had surgery, never been unconscious in a hospital, never participated in any medical trials. There's no surgical scarring visible on the scans. No evidence of recent trauma or healing. Ferris leaned back in his chair. This implant couldn't have been installed legally. Not without your knowledge and consent. The room felt cold suddenly. Keaton's hands were steady, but his mind raced through possibilities. Could it be causing the headaches? Almost certainly. Depending on what it's designed to do, it could be causing a variety of symptoms. Headaches, memory issues, mood changes. Memory issues. Keaton thought about the foggy conversations, the lost time, the feeling that parts of his life were happening without his full participation. Can you remove it? That's neurosurgery. Way beyond my expertise. But first, we need to figure out how it got there. Ferris printed copies of the scans and handed them to Keaton. I'm required to report this to the authorities. Someone installed a device in your brain without your consent. That's assault at minimum. Keaton took the papers but didn't look at them. Not yet. Mr. Bryce, I need time to think. About what? Someone violated your body. Possibly your mind. Just give me a few days. Ferris studied him for a long moment. 48 hours. Then I'm making the call. In the parking lot, Keaton sat in his car and stared at the MRI images. The object was small, but clearly visible, a dark spot where nothing should be. He tried to remember any period of unconsciousness, any time when someone could have accessed his head without his knowledge. Nothing, but the headaches made sense now, and the memory problems. Someone had put something in his brain, and that someone had to be close enough to do it without him knowing. The drive home took an hour in traffic. Keaton used the time to think, running through everyone in his life who might have had opportunity. The list was surprisingly short. He didn't socialize much, kept to a small circle of work colleagues and a few old friends. And Lana. Keaton spent the next morning installing security cameras throughout the house. Tiny devices no bigger than shirt buttons, hidden in picture frames and behind books. He also set up audio recording on his home server, programming it to monitor the landline and capture any wireless signals. Lana was in the garage, lost in her painting. She'd been out there since dawn, classical music providing soundtrack to whatever masterpiece consumed her attention. He tested the system from his laptop. Crystal clear video and audio from every room except the garage. He'd need physical access to install anything there. And Lana guarded her studio like a territorial animal. What are you doing? Keaton looked up to find Lana standing in the doorway, paint-stained apron tied around her waist. He'd been so focused on the laptop screen that he hadn't heard her come in. Work stuff. He closed the laptop, setting up a secure network for the office. At home, testing environment. Easier to troubleshoot here. She nodded, but her eyes lingered on the laptop. I made lunch, grilled cheese, and tomato soup. Thanks. I'll be there in a minute. Lana hesitated. Are you feeling better? The headaches? A little. Good. Maybe you just needed rest. She disappeared back toward the kitchen. Keaton waited a full minute before reopening the laptop. The cameras showed Lana in the kitchen, moving efficiently between stove and counter. Her body language looked normal, relaxed even, but something felt wrong. That afternoon, Keaton began tracking his own behavior. He set alarms on his phone every hour and made notes about how he felt, what he was doing, whether his thoughts seemed clear or foggy. 2:00 p.m. Alert focused working on encryption protocols 3 p.m. Slight headache. Difficulty concentrating 4:00 p.m. Severe headache, nauseous, lost 15 minutes 5 p.m., better. But memory of last hour fuzzy, the pattern emerged over 3 days. His worst symptoms occurred in late afternoon and early evening, usually around the time Lana finished painting and rejoined him in the house. That on Thursday night, Lana announced she was going out. Art therapy session with Rebecca. She's been struggling with her divorce. Keaton knew Rebecca from Lana's teaching days. A fellow art teacher, dramatic and emotional. "What time will you be back?" "Late. Don't wait up." She kissed his forehead and left through the garage. Keaton watched from the kitchen window as her car backed out of the driveway. 30 minutes later, he accessed the home server and reviewed the day's recordings. The cameras showed normal activity until around 4 p.m., when Lana had come into the house and made tea. She brought 2 cups to the living room, setting one on the coffee table near Keaton's usual chair. He drunk the tea without thinking. 20 minutes later, the headaches had started. Keaton rewound the footage and watched again. Lana making tea, bringing 2 cups, setting one where she knew he'd find it. Her movements were careful, deliberate, and he couldn't see what she'd put in his cup. Friday evening, Lana announced another late-night therapy session. This time, Keaton was ready. He followed her at a distance, keeping several cars between them as she drove through Palo Alto and on a Highway 80 toward Oakland. She wasn't going to Rebecca's suburban home. She was heading into industrial Emeryville. Lana's car turned into a complex of converted warehouses, the kind of place tech startups rented when they needed cheap space and didn't care about aesthetics. Keaton parked a block away and walked back, staying in the shadows between buildings. Through a grimy window, he saw Lana embrace a man he didn't recognize. Tall, maybe 40, with prematurely gray hair and expensive clothes that looked out of place in a rundown warehouse. They stood close together, intimate in a way that made Keaton's chest tighten. But this wasn't just an affair. The man had papers spread across a metal table, charts and graphs that looked medical. Lana pointed to something on one of the papers, and the man nodded, making notes. Keaton took photos with his phone, zooming in as much as possible. The images were grainy, but he could make out enough detail to know this wasn't a chance encounter. This was business, professional business involving his wife and a stranger. Back home, Lana returned after midnight, slipping into bed carefully so as not to wake him. She smelled like coffee and something else, something chemical and sterile. "How was Rebecca?" Keaton kept his voice sleepy, natural. "Better. We talked until late." "That's good. She's lucky to have a friend like you." Lana curled against his back, her breathing evening out as she fell asleep. Keaton lay awake until dawn, staring at the ceiling and thinking about brain implants and secret meetings and cups of tea that made him sick. Someone had violated his mind. Someone close enough to drug him, close enough to access his unconscious body. And that someone was lying next to him, sleeping peacefully after another night of deception. Keaton spent Saturday morning researching the warehouse district in Emeryville. Public records showed the building where he'd seen Lana was leased to something called Neurotech Solutions, a company that didn't seem to exist beyond a basic corporate filing. While Lana painted in the garage, he accessed their home router and reviewed weeks of network logs. Lana's laptop showed regular connections to encrypted servers, data transfers that happened during his worst headache episodes. She was uploading something regularly. During the times when his mind felt foggiest, Sunday afternoon, Lana left for another therapy session. This time, Keaton was in position an hour early, watching the warehouse from a coffee shop across the street. The gray-haired man arrived first, driving a black Tesla with tinted windows. 20 minutes later, Lana pulled up in her Honda. Through the telephoto lens he'd borrowed from work, Keaton got clear shots of both their faces. The man's name, according to the Tesla's license plate registration, was Thayer Cullen. Inside the warehouse, they worked at computer terminals, medical equipment visible in the background. Expensive stuff, the kind of high-tech gear found in research hospitals. Through the window, Keaton could see brain scan images on multiple monitors. His brain scan images. Monday morning, while Lana slept, Keaton broke into her laptop. Her fingerprint scanner had been cloned months ago during one of their casual moments together, when she'd asked him to unlock her phone to change the music. A simple matter of lifting the print from the surface and creating a silicone duplicate. The laptop's hard drive contained folders labeled with dates going back 6 months. Video files, data logs, something called Bryce test log, reprogramming phase 2. Keaton copied everything to an encrypted drive before Lana woke up. The videos showed him from multiple angles throughout their house. Hidden cameras he'd never noticed, recording his every movement. But these weren't just surveillance recordings. Someone had edited them, adding timestamps and behavioral annotations. Subject shows increased compliance during targeted neural stimulation. Memory suppression successful for 4-hour window. Emotional response dampened as expected. The final video file was the worst. Footage of him sitting in their living room, staring blankly at the television while Lana worked at a laptop beside him. The timestamp showed last Tuesday evening, but Keaton had no memory of the scene at all. According to the behavioral notes, he'd been under active neural influence for 3 hours. The test logs told the rest of the story. Someone was using the implant in his brain to modify his behavior, suppress his memories, and study his responses. And they've been doing it for months. The final entry in the log was dated yesterday. Phase 3 preparation complete. Subject ready for permanent neural restructuring. Keaton closed the laptop and walked to the kitchen window. Lana was in the garage, painting with her usual intensity. She looked beautiful and focused, the devoted artist pursuing her passion. She also looked like someone who'd been systematically destroying his mind for half a year. The research files on Lana's laptop contained academic papers, medical journals, correspondence with research institutions. Keaton printed everything and spread it across the dining room table like pieces of a puzzle. Thayer Cullen wasn't just some random stranger. He was Dr. Thayer Cullen, former neuroscience researcher at Stanford, current director of something called the Cognitive Modification Project. His published papers focused on neural implants and behavioral control. The correspondence painted a clearer picture. Cullen had been recruiting test subjects for an off-the-books study funded by a private biotech company. The goal was developing technology for behavioral compliance without conscious awareness. Military applications were mentioned. Interrogation enhancement. Crowd control. Lana's involvement went back to her graduate studies in psychology at UC Berkeley. She'd worked as a research assistant on early neural modification experiments, legal ones conducted with informed consent and institutional oversight. But those studies had limitations. Short duration, limited scope, volunteers who knew they were being tested. Cullen wanted subjects who could be monitored long-term without their knowledge. People whose behavior could be modified gradually, subtly, in natural environments that he needed partners willing to recruit from their personal lives. Lana had offered her husband. The email trail showed their relationship developing over months of professional collaboration. What started as academic interest became something more personal, more intimate. The subject responded well to yesterday's session. Memory gaps lasting 6+ hours with no awareness of missing time. I think we're ready for the next phase. Excellent work. Your dedication to the project continues to impress me. Dinner tonight to celebrate? I can't keep doing this much longer. He's getting suspicious about the headaches. We're almost finished. Phase 3 will eliminate his resistance entirely. After that, he won't be capable of suspicion. Keaton read the exchange 3 times, each pass making the betrayal more real. Lana wasn't just cheating on him. She was helping someone erase his personality, his autonomy, his essential self, and she was conflicted about it. Not enough to stop, but enough to feel guilty. The garage door opened. Lana's footsteps approached the house. Keaton swept the papers into a folder and closed the laptop just as she entered through the kitchen door. "How's the painting going?" His voice sounded normal, interested. "Good. Really good, actually. I think I'm finally finding my style." She looked happy, energetic. Paint decorated her hands and forearms in shades of blue and gray. She'd been working on something new, then, something that required cooler colors. "Can I see it?" "Not yet. It's not ready." "When will it be ready?" Lana paused, considering. "Soon. Maybe next week." Next week. According to the test logs, Phase 3 was scheduled to begin next week. Permanent neural restructuring. Whatever that meant, it didn't sound reversible. I'm looking forward to it. She smiled and kissed his cheek. You're going to love it. It's everything I've been working toward. That night, Keaton lay awake listening to Lana's breathing, thinking about the emails and test logs and brain scans. She'd volunteered him for medical experimentation without his knowledge or consent. She'd drugged him, monitored him, helped strangers install hardware in his skull, and she slept peacefully beside him, her hand resting on his chest like they were still the couple they'd been 8 years ago. Arden Bryce lived in a converted firehouse in Oakland, 15 minutes from the medical center, where she worked as a trauma nurse. Keaton's sister had always been practical, direct, someone who dealt with medical emergencies and human suffering as part of her daily routine. She took one look at the MRI images and started swearing. Jesus Christ, Keaton, how long has this been in there? I don't know, maybe 6 months. Who did this to you? Keaton told her everything. The headaches, the memory gaps, Lana's secret meetings with Thayer Cullen, the test logs documenting his behavioral modification. Arden listened without interruption, her expression growing darker with each detail. You need to call the police. I need to understand how they did it first. They put a device in your brain without your consent. That's assault, maybe attempted murder. There has to be a time when I was unconscious. Surgery requires anesthesia, recovery time. I would have noticed. Arden opened her laptop and accessed medical databases, typing quickly. Let me check your insurance records. Any hospital visits, emergency room trips, anything that might explain when this happened. The insurance database showed routine checkups, dental cleanings, one urgent care visit for food poisoning 2 years ago. Nothing involving anesthesia or surgical procedures. Wait. Arden scrolled further back. Here, 3 years ago. Emergency room visit at Alta Bates. Head trauma from a hiking accident. Keaton remembered the incident vaguely. He'd been hiking alone in the hills near Santa Cruz, had slipped and hit his head on a rock. Lana had found him when he didn't return on schedule, had insisted on taking him to the hospital despite his protests that he felt fine. It says here you were admitted for observation. Possible concussion. Neurological workup ordered by attending physician. I was only there overnight. Overnight is enough for surgery if they have the right equipment and expertise. Arden pulled up more detailed records. Look at this. Dr. Elena Vasquez was the attending physician, but the neurological consult was done by Thayer Cullen. The pieces clicked into place. Lana hadn't found him after the hiking accident. She caused it. She pushed me. What? I didn't slip. Lana pushed me off that ledge. She staged the whole thing to get me into a hospital where Cullen could operate. Arden stared at him. That's premeditated assault. Possibly attempted murder. She needed me unconscious and in a medical facility. The hiking accident gave her both. But why you? Why not find a volunteer, someone willing to participate? Keaton thought about the research files, the behavioral modification goals, the military applications. They needed a long-term test subject, someone they could monitor continuously without arousing suspicion. A spouse has perfect access. So she married you to experiment on you. No, we were already married when she met Cullen. She recruited me later. The distinction felt important somehow. Lana had loved him once, before she'd chosen to destroy him. Arden printed copies of the medical records and insurance claims. This is evidence of conspiracy. Medical fraud at minimum. It's not enough. I need more. What more do you need? They put a device in your brain and have been controlling your behavior for 3 years. I need to know exactly what the implant does, how it works, whether the effects are reversible. What? Keaton looked at his sister, this woman who'd spent her career saving lives and healing trauma. She wouldn't understand what he was planning, because I want them to pay for what they've done. The police can handle that. No, they can't. He gathered the papers and stood to leave. Arden caught his arm. Don't do anything stupid, Keaton. I won't. Promise me. He looked into her eyes, seeing concern and fear and love. Arden had always protected him, even when they were children. She'd stood up to bullies, defended him against their parents' unrealistic expectations, supported his choices even when she disagreed with them. I promise I won't do anything stupid. What he was planning wasn't stupid. It was calculated, methodical, and absolutely necessary. But it wasn't something his sister needed to know about. Doctor Aurelia Voss lived in a cabin hidden among the redwoods north of Santa Cruz, 40 miles from civilization and accessible only by a dirt road that tested the limits of Keaton's sedan. She'd been difficult to find, existing mainly as rumors and encrypted forum posts about helping victims of experimental medical abuse. The woman who answered his knock looked like she'd stepped out of a conspiracy theorist's nightmare. Wild gray hair, clothes that might have been fashionable in the 1970s, eyes that seemed to see too much. "You're the implant case Arden told me about." "Dr. Voss." "Just Aurelia. Come in before someone sees you." The cabin's interior was a mixture of high-tech medical equipment and rustic living. Computer monitors displaying brain scans shared space with hand-carved furniture and shelves of old books. "Show me the MRI images." Keaton handed over the folder. Aurelia studied each scan carefully, occasionally comparing images on her computer. Echo-stim neural interface. Military grade. Very expensive. Very illegal for civilian use. "You recognize it? I helped design it. Back when I thought we were developing therapy for trauma victims." Her laugh was bitter. "Turns out the military had other plans." "Can you remove it?" "Removal requires neurosurgery. Too risky and probably unnecessary." "What do you mean?" Aurelia turned one of her monitors toward him. The screen showed a three-dimensional model of a human brain with a small device highlighted in red. The Echo-Stim interface works by intercepting neural signals and replacing them with programmed responses. But the programming has to be actively maintained. Disable the signal pathway, and the device becomes inert. How do you disable it? Electromagnetic pulse, precisely calibrated. Fries the circuits without damaging surrounding tissue. She led him to what looked like a dentist's chair surrounded by sophisticated machinery. "This will hurt. The device has been integrated with your neural pathways for years. Disconnecting it suddenly might cause seizures, disorientation, memory flashbacks." "What kind of memory flashbacks?" "Suppressed experiences. Things the device blocked from your conscious awareness." Keaton already knew what she would find, but he needed the device permanently disabled. "Do it." The procedure took 20 minutes. Aurelia attached sensors to his skull and activated machinery that hummed with barely contained energy. Pain shot through Keaton's head, worse than any headache he'd experienced. When it was over, he felt the last artificial barrier in his mind disappear completely. Fascinating. Aurelia studied readings on her monitors. This device failed catastrophically about 3.5 years ago. Complete signal pathway breakdown. What does that mean? It means you haven't been controlled for years. The device has been completely inert. Keaton nodded. "I know. You know? How long have you known?" "About 6 months after they installed it. I realized the programming wasn't working anymore, but I kept pretending it was." Aurelia stared at him. "You've been faking compliance for nearly 4 years. I needed time to gather evidence, to understand exactly what they were doing and who was involved. Why didn't you just leave? Report them immediately?" Keaton's smile was cold. "Because I wanted them to destroy themselves completely. And I wanted to control exactly how it happened." Understanding dawned in Aurelia's eyes. "You've been planning this entire time. Every day for 4 years. Building evidence, documenting their crimes, preparing for the moment when I could take everything away from them." The man she tried to erase was already gone, Aurelia said quietly. "Exactly. They just don't know it yet." Keaton spent the next week executing a plan he'd been refining for nearly 4 years. Every step had been calculated, every contingency prepared for during the long months of pretending to be controlled. First, he emptied their joint bank accounts and converted the money to untraceable cryptocurrency wallets. Lana's access to their savings disappeared overnight, though she wouldn't discover it until she tried to withdraw cash. Second, he anonymously reported the illegal research to NIH regulators, using data he'd been systematically copying from Lana's files for years. The complaint included detailed evidence of human experimentation without consent, fraudulent medical procedures, and violation of federal research ethics guidelines. Third, he He researched Thayer Cullen's upcoming speaking engagement at the International Conference on Neural Interface Technology in San Francisco. Cullen was scheduled to present on ethical applications of behavioral modification as the keynote speaker. The irony was perfect. Keaton contacted the conference organizers using credentials from a legitimate tech journalism company where he'd cultivated contacts over the years. We're interested in conducting interviews with select speakers about breakthrough neuroscience research. Could we arrange something with Dr. Cullen? Absolutely. Dr. Cullen loves media attention. We can set up a pre-conference interview session. The interview was scheduled for the day before Cullen's keynote, in a hotel conference room with full video recording capabilities. Keaton arrived early with professional equipment, setting up multiple cameras that would capture every angle of the room. But the real preparation had happened months earlier. Hidden cameras in his own house had recorded hundreds of hours of Lana and Cullen's planning sessions when they thought he was under neural control. Conversations about expanding the research, finding new test subjects, perfecting the behavioral modification protocols. Most damning were the sessions where they discussed his eventual fate. Keaton had edited this footage carefully, creating a comprehensive documentary of their conspiracy. The video showed Cullen and Lana reviewing brain scans, discussing neural restructuring procedures, and planning what they called Phase 3 implementation. He'd also compiled emails, research notes, and financial records showing the illegal funding sources and military applications of their work. All of it was ready to replace Cullen's presentation at exactly the right moment. The conference organizers had provided Keaton with technical access to the presentation system for his documentary filming. A few lines of code were all it took to gain administrative control over the conference's video equipment. When Cullen took the stage for his keynote the next morning, everything would proceed normally until the moment Keaton chose to reveal the truth. Cullen arrived at the hotel interview room precisely on time, confident and charismatic as always. He had no idea he was walking into a trap that had been 4 years in the making. Dr. Cullen, thank you for joining us today. My pleasure. I'm always happy to discuss the future of ethical neuroscience. Your keynote tomorrow focuses on responsible applications of neural modification technology. Can you give us a preview? For 20 minutes, Cullen spoke eloquently about helping trauma victims and treating mental illness through targeted neural intervention. He emphasized the importance of informed consent and rigorous ethical oversight. Every word was a lie, and Keaton had video proof. That sounds fascinating. I understand you've been conducting some groundbreaking research in real-world applications. Cullen's expression shifted slightly. Our research follows all established protocols, of course. But theoretical applications are one thing. Practical implementation must present unique challenges. Every research program faces challenges. The key is maintaining ethical standards while pushing the boundaries of what's possible. Keaton smiled. We actually have some footage of your practical research that might interest our viewers. He reached for his laptop and pulled up the first video file. On the screen, Cullen and Lana appeared in the Emeryville warehouse, reviewing brain scans while discussing neural compliance protocols. The color drained from Cullen's face. Where did you get this? From a subject you've been experimenting on for 4 years. Recognition dawned slowly. Keaton Bryce. The implant failed years ago. Thayer. I've been documenting everything you and my wife have done to me. Cullen stood abruptly. This interview is over. Actually, it's just beginning. Tomorrow morning, when you give your keynote on ethical neuroscience, this footage will replace your presentation. Every conference attendee will see exactly what your ethical research looks like in practice. You can't do that. I already have. The conference video system is under my control. Your career will end in front of 500 of your professional peers. Keaton showed him a tablet displaying the conference's internal network. Administrative access granted, presentation files replaced, everything ready for tomorrow's revelation. The NIH received an anonymous complaint about your research yesterday. Federal investigators are already reviewing the evidence. Your funding will disappear, your research will be shut down, and you'll face criminal charges. What do you want? I want you to understand what you've done. You stole 4 years of my life. You violated my mind. You turned my wife into an accomplice in your crimes. The research has tremendous potential. We were helping advance human knowledge. You were helping yourself. This was never about therapy or treatment. This was about control and power. Keaton gathered his equipment and headed for the door. Wait, what about Lana? She was just following research protocols. Lana chose to participate. Now she'll face the consequences. The next morning, Keaton sat in the conference auditorium as Cullen took the stage for his keynote presentation. 500 neuroscientists, researchers, and medical professionals filled the seats, eager to hear about cutting-edge developments in their field. Cullen began his presentation confidently, discussing the theoretical benefits of neural modification technology. His slides showed clinical diagrams and research abstracts, carefully sanitized versions of his actual work. 10 minutes into the presentation, Keaton activated the system override. The conference screens suddenly displayed hidden camera footage from the Emeryville warehouse. Cullen's voice could be heard clearly discussing illegal human experimentation, behavioral control protocols, and plans for permanent neural restructuring of unwilling subjects. The audience erupted in shocked murmurs as more footage played, showing Lana and Cullen reviewing brain scans of their test subject, discussing memory suppression techniques, and planning what they called cognitive elimination procedures. Cullen tried to regain control, frantically pressing buttons on his presentation remote, but the system was locked. The damning evidence continued to play for another 10 minutes, documenting years of illegal research and human rights violations. When the footage finally ended, the auditorium was silent. Cullen stood alone on the stage, his reputation and career destroyed in front of his entire professional community. Conference security escorted him from the building as attendees began filing out in shocked silence. By evening, videos of the presentation had spread across social media and academic networks. Professional organizations began distancing themselves from Cullen. Research institutions launched ethics investigations, and federal prosecutors announced a criminal probe into illegal human experimentation. Keaton waited until the news of Cullen's public humiliation had spread throughout the academic community before making his final move. 3 days after the conference, he sent Lana a simple text message. "We need to talk. Come home tonight. One last conversation before we decide what happens next." She arrived at 8 o'clock, looking exhausted and frightened. The Cullen scandal had made national news, and she knew her own exposure was inevitable. "Thank you for coming. What do you want, Keaton? I want to show you something." He led her to the living room, where he'd set up a laptop on the coffee table. The screen displayed a timeline spanning 4 years, marked with dates, locations, and specific incidents. "This is a comprehensive record of everything you and Thayer have done to me since the hiking accident." Lana sat slowly, studying the screen. Her face was pale, but she remained composed. March 15th, 2021. "You pushed me off that ledge and staged a hiking accident to get me into Alta Bates Hospital, where Thayer was waiting to perform illegal surgery." Keaton. July 22nd, 2021. First documented use of behavioral modification protocols. "You drugged my evening tea and activated the neural interface while I was unconscious." He clicked to the next screen, showing email exchanges between Lana and Cullen. October 8th, 2021. Quote, "Subject shows increased compliance during targeted sessions. Memory suppression successful for 6-hour windows." Stop. December 3rd, 2021. Quote, "Keaton asked about his missing time again today. I told him he'd been working late and forgot. He believed me." Keaton continued through the timeline methodically, reading excerpts from their correspondence, showing video footage from hidden cameras, documenting years of systematic abuse. Lana's composure began to crack. January 18th, 2024. "Your message to Thayer. We need to move to phase 3 soon. I can't keep doing this. Please stop." And finally, March 2nd, 2025. Just 6 weeks ago, Keaton activated an audio file. Lana's voice filled the room, clear and unmistakable. "He's not meant to survive this, Thayer. The migraines mean it's working. Phase 3 will eliminate him completely, and we can publish the research with full behavioral modification success rates." Lana stood abruptly, backing away from the laptop. "Where did you get that?" "From your own phone. I've been recording everything for 4 years. That's impossible. The implant was working. You were compliant. The implant failed 6 months after installation. I've been faking compliance ever since, gathering evidence while you and Thayer planned to murder me. Understanding dawned in her eyes. You've been pretending this whole time. Every single day, watching you drug my food, listening to you plan my destruction, documenting your crimes while you thought you were in control. Lana's face twisted with rage. You were boring. You were robotic. You never showed emotion, never connected with anyone. You needed fixing. She grabbed a glass from the side table and hurled it at his head. Keaton ducked, and it shattered against the wall behind him. You think you understand what we were doing, but you don't. The research could have helped millions of people by experimenting on unwilling subjects, by proving the technology works in real conditions. You're broken, Keaton, emotionally dead. We could have made you better. You don't get to decide what needs fixing about me. Lana picked up a decorative vase, raising it like a weapon. You're going to destroy everything. Years of breakthrough research because you can't accept improvement. Put it down, Lana. No, you need to understand. The work we were doing was revolutionary. Neuromodification could eliminate depression, anxiety, trauma. We could cure mental illness by erasing people's personalities, by making them better. She threw the vase. Keaton stepped aside and pulled a pen from his shirt pocket, holding it where she could see clearly. This has been recording everything since you walked in the door. Lana stared at the device. What? Your confession. Your attack on me. The justification for trying to murder your husband. All documented. She sank onto the couch, suddenly looking much older. What do you want? I want you to choose. Keaton sat across from her, the pen camera still recording between them. You have 2 options. First, you can confess everything to the University Ethics Board, the NIH investigators, and the police. You can testify against Thayer and provide evidence about the illegal research program. And second, you get buried with him. I release all the evidence showing you as an equal partner in his crimes. You face federal charges for conspiracy, assault, medical fraud, and attempted murder. Lana was quiet for a long moment, staring at the timeline on the laptop screen. If I testify against Thayer, what happens to me? You'll still face charges, but the prosecutors will consider your cooperation. Reduced sentence instead of life in prison. And if I don't, you go down with the ship. Thayer's already planning to blame everything on you to save himself. He's telling investigators you were the one who recruited me. You were the one who staged the accident. You were the one who pushed for Phase 3 implementation. Her head snapped up. That's not true. Prove it. Testify against him. Show them the evidence of his leadership role. Lana looked around the living room, seeing perhaps for the first time the home they'd shared before she'd chosen to destroy him. I loved you once. Not enough. I thought I was helping you become a better person. You thought you were playing God. She was crying now, tears mixing with the paint stains that still decorated her hands. What happened to us, Keaton? You chose Thayer Cullen over your husband. You chose illegal research over human decency. You chose to erase me rather than accept me as I was. I take the deal. Smart choice. Keaton stopped the recording and saved the file. You have 24 hours to contact the FBI and arrange your testimony. If you don't, this recording and all the other evidence gets released to every news outlet in the country. Where am I supposed to go? That's not my problem anymore. He walked her to the door, watching as she got in her car, and drove away for the last time. 20 minutes later, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Mr. Bryce, this is Agent Torres, FBI. Your wife just called wanting to arrange a meeting about the Cullen investigation. Thank you for your cooperation in this matter. Keaton deleted the message and poured himself a glass of water. Through the kitchen window, he could see the garage where Lana had spent months painting while planning his destruction. Tomorrow, he would clean it out and convert it back to its original purpose. But tonight, for the first time in 4 years, his home truly belonged to him again. 6 months later, Keaton stood on the deck of his new house in Mendocino, watching fog roll in from the Pacific. The ocean stretched to the horizon, vast and empty and clean. Thayer Cullen had been arrested 3 weeks after the neuroscience conference. Federal charges included conspiracy, assault, medical fraud, and violation of human research ethics. He was currently awaiting trial. His research shut down, his reputation destroyed. The biotech company funding his work had quietly dissolved, its executives claiming no knowledge of illegal experimentation. Lana had taken the plea deal. Testimony against Cullen in exchange for reduced charges. She'd relocated to a small coastal town south of San Francisco, working as a waitress under her maiden name that she'd lost her teaching license, her reputation, and any chance of working in education again. The house in Palo Alto had sold quickly. Keaton used the proceeds to buy this place, a simple structure with clean lines and large windows facing the ocean. No hidden cameras, no surveillance equipment, no medical devices designed to monitor his behavior. Just space and silence and the sound of waves against rocks that a car pulled into the gravel driveway. Greer Lawson emerged carrying a thermos and a bag from the local bakery. Coffee and pastries. I figured you might be hungry. Greer owned a bar in the village, a place where locals gathered to argue about fishing regulations and complain about tourists. She was direct, funny, and completely unimpressed by Keaton's story of neural implants and behavior modification. Most relationships have trust issues, she'd said when he'd told her everything. Yours just had better technology. They sat on the deck drinking coffee and watching the fog swallow the horizon. Any word from the FBI? Greer asked. Trial starts next month. They want me to testify about the behavioral modifications. Will you? Yes. Cullen needs to face consequences for what he did. What about Lana? Keaton considered this. He'd thought about his ex-wife often during the past 6 months, trying to understand how someone he'd loved could have participated in destroying him. She made her choice. Now she's living with it. No forgiveness. No forgiveness. Greer nodded. She understood that some betrayals were too complete for redemption. You look different than when you first moved here, she said. Different how? More like yourself. Less like someone pretending to be himself. Keaton smiled. That's because I finally am myself. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fog advance across the water. The ocean was constant, reliable, unchanged by human schemes and technological manipulation in the distance. A fishing boat moved slowly through the mist, its captain navigating by instruments and experience toward whatever harbor offered safety. Keaton understood the feeling. After months of neural modification and behavioral control, he was finally navigating by his own internal compass again. And for the first time in years, he knew exactly where he was going.